When we arrived on Vancouver Island, everybody who realized that we were not locals kept recommending that we go to Malcolm Island. So we booked a ticket on the ferry, and while we were on the ferry, a man asked us why we were visiting the island. We mentioned that countless people had told us that we should visit, but we had also looked into it, and we found out that the killer whales actually come to a beach on the island and rub their bellies on the rocks. And that is definitely something that we will make a detour for. The man that we were talking to seemed to be very proud of the orcas, and he mentioned if we were going to go out to Bear Point to see the orcas, that we should also chat with the researcher who was out there studying the whales. That is the exact kind of intel that we live for in our travels. We're also just big wildlife nerds, and we will jump at any opportunity to talk to an expert. Bear Point is made up almost entirely of the world's best skipping rocks. I kid you not. They're oval, they're gray, and they fit perfectly in the palm of your hand. We spotted the buildings as we were walking our way down the beach, kind of balancing on the massive driftwood logs that sit kind of up at the high tide line. They're so big that Owen and I had been practicing our cartwheels on them earlier that morning. The Summer Olympics was on, and yes, we were feeling very inspired. Bear Point Research is made up of 2 small buildings. Each are no bigger than a garden shed. They're backed up to a really dense pine forest that kind of actually serves as the backstop for the entire coastline of Malcolm Island. And sure enough, sitting on his porch, staring at the ocean, was Troy, the researcher that we had been told about. I worked up every ounce of courage I could muster to ask a perfect stranger if I could interview them for the first time. Go ahead and press record. We'll just slowly kind of work our way into it. But yeah, I wasn't necessarily planning on doing this. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and say this now. Before we get into this interview, I was so nervous. Like, so nervous. And you can absolutely tell. Needless to say, I've learned a great deal listening back to this recording, and I have a lot of work to do for future interviews. First things first, would you mind introducing yourself?
Well, my name is Troy Bright, and I live on Malcolm Island on the British Columbia coast. And I'm here at Bear Point, which is on what we call the wild side of Malcolm Island. Yeah.
So are you from Malcolm Island originally?
No, I grew up in Nova Scotia on the other coast of Canada. And I've been on Malcolm Island for 28 years.
Okay, so how did you find your way here?
Well, I came up to the area looking for a place to do some research on the northern resident killer whales. And I accidentally came to Bear Point. I took the wrong ferry from Port McNeill, which is where you catch the ferry to come over here. There's a ferry that goes to another island, Alert Bay, which I had read about, and that's where I was intending to go. But I took the wrong ferry, and I ended up on Malcolm Island. And there were some kids on the ferry that I met when I was on the ferry, and they told me I could see killer whales from this place called Bear Point, and that I should come over here. So I did, and a lot of the rest is history now. I mean, yeah, it's been 28 years since I've been collecting data out here on northern resident killer whales.
I feel like that is the most amazing accidental turn that anybody has ever taken. So, okay, you came here, maybe not here specifically, but you came here looking for whales.
Yeah, the area.
The area. Okay. Can you tell me about, like, the first whale memory you have? Like, can you remember back? Yeah?
I know. Yeah, I remember very clearly. Well, it really was the first rubbing encounter that I had here at Bear Point, which was in July of 1997. And there was a couple locals on the beach, I remember, and they had seen whales before, but I hadn't, and I was all excited about it. And I remember saying to them, like, oh, there's some orca, you know, and they were like, yeah, we see them there, yeah. Anyway, the whales came in, and they were rubbing in the beach, and I got very close to the whales down on the shoreline. And it was just a majestic experience that I couldn't believe I was, like, having, you know, since I was pursuing this in the first place. And but I've learned not to get so close to them now when they're rubbing on the beach. It's not the thing I did back then is not the thing to do now. I've learned that over the years. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that is amazing. I think that anytime you have like a profound experience with a wildlife, like that always, I have so many of those moments and they always like really stick with me. Okay. But you came here knowing that you were interested in whales. How did you, specifically orcas, it sounds like, how did you find your way to orcas?
Oh, geez, how did I find my way? I mean,
because Nova Scotia is like a water-bound place. Right. So were you seeing orcas out in Nova Scotia?
No, I wasn't. I really didn't have like whales on my radar at that time in my life. I left Nova Scotia mainly because the economy was like it's not a real booming economy there like British Columbia. So I had an opportunity to come to British Columbia. I took it, and it wasn't until later, like 8 years being in British Columbia, that I got wind of this orca and sort of their their social lives, their matrilineal groups, and the dialects that they have from their calls, which is all really, really, really interesting stuff. So that's pretty much what took place there before I got to Malcolm Island. Like I was on the Lower Mainland in around Vancouver, and spent 8 years there. And yeah, so it was that. The book that I read was the Orca, the Whale Called Killer, by an author, Eric Hoyt. And in that book, he really has a just fantastic description of the early days of the research that was done here with, some purist guys who were like sailors who wouldn't have a motor on the boat. They'd just sail, and they didn't know a lot about the whales then. So that book really compelled me, I suppose, to get involved in some kind of way. I don't have a degree in marine biology, but I had a real strong interest, enough that it was motivating me to leave and go and find somewhere where I could just see them. So that's basically what I did. Yeah.
Do you know what that's called? That's called passion. Right. That you followed. Yeah. And I think that we can probably both agree that passion has kept you for, did you say 28 years? 28 years. 28 years. That's incredible. Okay. So Troy does not have a degree in marine biology or any formal training for that matter. Instead, he is entirely driven by his passion and love for these animals. So can you tell me about the work that you're doing here? Yeah. Well,
now, after all these years have passed, it's pretty much what you might call a monitoring program. But in the early days, I seeked out scientists who actually had degrees and asked them what kind of data they thought I would be useful to collect. I'm still basically collecting that data, identifications, behaviors, the direction of travel, time spent. There's so many various things you can collect. But the rubbing at the beach is one particular behavior that we pay a lot of attention to. So we make hydrophone recordings of that and really observe that, take as many photographs and video as we can. Yeah, for the most part, that's pretty much what I'm doing now as a monitoring program, yeah. But I did do a small study that found out that if too much human activity is taking place at the rubbing beach, that the whales could either abort their rub or shorten the length of time that they were rubbing. So that's something that I learned over the years, and I'm able to kind of translate that to the public that comes to visit here, which is ultimately, we hope, good for the whales.
Oh, absolutely. I feel like you are an incredible ambassador for the whales, and I would say for this island. I don't know if you know this, but your reputation does precede you a little bit. It's all good, first of all. Every single person that we talk to who either absolutely out of the blue just like realized that we were not from around here, and they were like, oh, you have to go out there. And everybody also mentioned that we had to talk to you. So you are, I would say, just so you know, you are just as loved, I think, as the whales that live here.
Well, that's awesome to hear. I do feel that living here on Malcolm Island, and the visitors are, for the most part, really appreciative of what I'm doing here, and anything I can help them with. Yeah, So that's awesome. I'd like to hear that.
Oh yeah, well I'm so glad to be the one to let you know that. Okay, so I do have some very specific whale questions. But before we get into those, what is your favorite orca trait?
Family and their commitment to family. I would say that's probably the strong. I mean, it centers around all of what they do is family. You know, I don't know if you call that a trait, but yeah, that commitment they have to their family is just the ultimate. It's even stronger than maybe ours because they don't leave mom for the most part forever. Ever. I mean, the females do over time when they start having their own calves. They may be seen a little distant, you know, by themselves at times. But when it comes to a male orca, at least for any residents, no, he's never leaving mom.
Wow, I had
Never,
no idea.
never really he leave his mother. I mean, maybe a little description. Orcas have menopause. So orcas go through menopause. They stop reproducing around 40 or so, much like humans do. And so they can live another 50 years and not have any calves at all. Yeah. And so for the sons, there's been some studies done on that. Why is it that the sons will never leave mom? And the sort of thought is that mom's very helpful. Mom.
They got it good. They know they got it good.
Yeah, I know. All moms are very helpful. That's for sure. All moms are awesome.
They know what they got going on.
Yeah, but he can get help in places where to get food, where to find food, because she of course has this kind of knowledge. You know, they're kind of the knowledge keepers, the matriarchs, and so that's another thing that's just super interesting about these guys. That commitment they have with their families, and it's amazing to watch.
So I'm not going to assume anything. At this rate, when we have orcas coming in to rub their bellies on the beach, can you identify them visually?
Visually and acoustically. With my hydrophone, because so the northern resident killer whales are made up of 3 clans of whales, A, G, and R clan, and those whales are acoustically related, which means they use the same calls over and over again, like when they're just carrying on with their lives. So they make calls that are similar, whales that would be like an R clan or a G clan or A clan, but amongst those clans, there's matrilineal family groups, and those matrilineal family groups have what's called dialects. Well, you probably know what dialects are in humans, but they're very much the same thing. They're the same kind of calls, but they're a little bit different in the way they make them. So if you listen long enough, you'll know who they are. And I've listened long enough now.
It's got to be a cool feeling. It's kind of like you're like, I feel like I've picked up the other landline and I'm listening on everybody's phone calls.
Yeah. Well, it really helps to have that knowledge.
Oh, yeah.
Because a lot of times it's foggy here. You can't see them, but you can hear them. But if you can, if you know who they are through their calls, and you're like, okay, that's who it is, the 34s or whoever it is, it's very helpful kind of thing. And what would you say? It's an incredible life that these whales live. It's highly complex, so that part of it is just really quite amazing to me. It's enough to keep you motivated for years and years and years.
Well, I think that you may have sensed the question that was coming, maybe not next, was what has kept you motivated after all of these years to be out here?
Well, it's a wonderful, beautiful space to start with. Just the natural environment around here. It's a really great place to see a lot of things go on besides the whales. But now I've got to know the whales, so it's natural history right in front of me, and I've already watched a whole bunch of it. So yeah, I have great concern for their welfare and their well-being, and I'm always super excited to find out what's happening this year and who arrives.
What's the drama?
Who's not there? Yeah, what are they up to this year? And that's really, I guess, part of that drive is caring about them, feeling this connection, even though it's a wild animal. since we have them cataloged and stuff, we know them. And some of them I've known from the time, for as far as they're concerned, this camp or whatever has always been here. Maybe. It's hard to know what they're going on in their minds, but.
No, I feel like that is an incredible concept. One thing that I actually learned while we were heading out here that I did not realize is that the whales that come here are very different with some of the other different orca pods that travel through this area. Can you tell me the difference between those two?
Yeah. Okay. So on the BC coast, there's 3 ecotypes. They're known as ecotypes. So there's resident killer whales. There's southern resident killer whales that live around the Puget Sound area, off of Seattle and off of Victoria. They're both in Canadian and U.S. waters. And then there's the northern residents. And then there's whales known as Biggs orca, or the old name was transients, and those are marine mammal hunting orca. And then there's offshore killer whales that are not seen on the inside waters very much, but we have an idea of how many there is on the coast offshore. So those whales all have different cultures, basically, and they don't intermingle together. They don't interbreed. Even the southerns and the northerns that have very much the same lifestyle, they eat Chinook salmon as their preferred prey, but fish, and matrilineal groups that stay together for almost ever. So yeah, those are the 4 groups that we have on this coast, which is somewhat a unique thing to have these different. Some people would call them races. We call them ecotypes of killer whales, because they have such different cultures, and they just, if Mom didn't introduce you, then I don't know you. That's pretty much how it is with killer whales.
There is very little commingling, I guess, if you will.
There's none. There's none really. They get close to each other at times, but they don't interact. They don't interbreed. It's a closed kind of community in a way. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. I knew none of that. That is.
I was just curious if maybe you could kind of describe what the rubbing is.
Oh yeah, what are they doing? That person who just chimed in is Owen. He's my husband and travel partner.
Well, the beach rubbing activity or the behaviors that they sort of do around this area, they don't come out of the water like some people may have seen orcas take in seals in Argentina, where they beach themselves and take the seals. But they don't do that here. They don't do that in that sense where they come right out of the water. They're basically in the really, really shallow water. But it's really the beach makeup of the rocks that brings them here. This is just one spot on the coast that they do that. The belief is by most of us in this community of researchers of these orca is this part of the cultural tradition of the northern resident killer whales to rub on beaches on the BC coast. The other whales that we know just have never been seen to do it. So if there is a biological reason or some kind of a health reason, why aren't they all doing it? Why are not all the killer whales that are on the coast doing it when these beaches are all up and down the coast? So it's a very interesting and unique thing that they do, just them. Yeah.
Remember those perfect skipping rocks I mentioned earlier? Well, it's suspected that those rocks and the makeup of this beach as a whole is one of the main reasons why the whales come here to do this. Even though the beach is a steep slope down to the water, and then the depth of the water is shallow and even for a good ways out from the beach, giving them plenty of space to enjoy the rubbing beach in the shallows. Troy is a part, actually, of a bigger network of researchers that are observing the whales at different rubbing beaches in the area in hopes of gaining a better understanding of this particular cultural practice. I like to think it's because it feels nice.
Yeah.
That's why I would do it personally.
They do exhibit that in the calls they make sometimes when they're rubbing, and also when you're watching them, just how kind of relaxed they seem to be. They might do a little rubbing and then just kind of float on the surface, while the other ones are having a little session too. Yeah, so it's definitely something they continue to keep doing. They bring their little calves. They show them to do this. This is one place you can do it. passing on that that generational knowledge of what to do and where to go. So yeah, it's pretty special to them and special to see because they're very close to shore.
Yeah. So I feel like this question is a little bit more philosophical. I'm just curious if you have learned anything about yourself or maybe like humanity through watching the whales over the years.
Most certainly. I mean, there's probably many ways to describe what that feeling is that they've brought me. Patience is certainly one of them. That's a huge one. Just patience, period.
Imagine that.
Yeah, it's really been eye-opening that there's these animals out there. I think that's why originally I was so drawn to them and wanting to just, purely watch them because of the information I was learning that, matrilineal groups and calls and dialects and massive brains that look just like ours. Like, what is this creature? Like, that's what, I think we're all still kind of asking about that. Even though we know a lot, I think it's still, there's still much, much more to learn about them. And they could teach us a lot about how to be in the world. They don't really have what we would call fights. They don't have wars. They don't have, such things that humans have caused. And now, after, maybe it's a little bit off topic in a sense, but now after all these years watching them and finding out so much information about them, and being concerned about their welfare, we really do know that it's up to us now, the human race, to make steps to ensure that they continue to have these wonderful, successful lives and societies that they have in the ocean that they've created for themselves. They deserve us to do something substantial that makes sure that's okay. I'll say a quote from a book I was reading. Dr. Ken Balcom wrote, or he wrote part of the book there, and it's like segments of researchers, and he stated that the orca and humans are the two most cerebral creatures to ever live on the planet Earth. Yeah. And on this coast, they've been here 100,000 years before any humans, which including First Nations. They were here co-evolving with salmon. So when I remember reading that, and I saw whales that day, and it just really struck me, like, these things have been here for 100,000 years before any humans were anywhere near this whole coast of North America, and developing this successful society, lifestyle. And it's amazing is not the word for it. I don't know what the words. There's so many words.
I don't think there
to
is a
describe
word
them.
for that.
Fascinating, majestic. There's so many. We might have to invent one or something. I don't know for those guys.
I'm sure we could look to Japanese. The Japanese language has like so many more words for describing connections with other things than we have, and I guarantee that they maybe have something in there. But I think that wildlife in general and a passion for wildlife is always going to bring you back to we all deserve a place to like raise a family and to be successful in whatever means that looks like, just to have the opportunity to do so in a healthy environment.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. That's right. We need to maybe start thinking about that a lot more.
Yeah. We're all kind of related. If you go back far enough, we're all related. We're all brothers and sisters in this.
We are, yeah. And hopefully in the future we'll do more of that, uniting ourselves together for better, for good, for peace, for, whatever. All those good things that we know we can do and we can have. Yeah.
Okay, so before we started recording, this was something that we started to touch on, and I am genuinely curious, as somebody who also has to do a lot of hard work to raise the money to do the work that they're passionate about. How do you fund your work?
Well, for the most part, I work and I try to save my money to be here. I have had some private funders that have helped me out with gear and supplies, and some government funding at times for that too. But for the most part, it's funding for gear and funding for food and supplies. Yeah. Never been paid.
Do you have a way for people to find you and your work to support you?
Right now I do. Yeah, actually.
Tell me everything.
Well, because a friend of mine started a GoFundMe.
That's right.
Thing, and to raise some money for some supplies and stuff I need, some more gear that I just haven't been able to afford, and it's still going. It was set up in 2021, but I guess it's an ongoing thing because she just texted me not long ago. She's like, "Well, this is still open. We can try to get this because I need a new camera."
Amazing.
Camera.
Yes.
So that's about the only place that I would say there's something open to the public to help out with my project.
Okay, perfect. I'm going to get that from you so I can share it when this goes live, because I would love for people to be able to have a way to support your work, because going back to what I said earlier about your reputation preceding yourself, I think that passionate people doing things that make the world a better place deserve to have their work funded, and I think that you are one of those people.
Yes, well, thank you. I really appreciate that. Yeah. Yeah, I'm not. It's not a whole lot really in the big picture of things, and I'm not asking for anything. But if people help out with the gear and stuff, so I can just be here and just continue this work, that's all I want. I'm not looking to get paid for this or whatever. It's my thing, sort of. So, yeah, cool. That sounds great. Yeah,
amazing. That is what passion looks like right there in the flesh. All right. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time and expertise.
You're so welcome. You're so welcome. Thank you, too.
After our conversation, Troy offered to play us some different recordings from Orcas that he's recorded on his hydrophone, which, as the name suggests, is a microphone that lives in the water and has the ability to record the calls from whales up to 5 miles away. Here they are. So cool. Thank you so much. This episode of Camp Nowhere is brought to you by Red Arc. For the last 4 years on the road, our entire life has been running on Red Arc's power management systems. Whether we're charging our camera gear, powering Starlink for remote work, or making this podcast in the middle of nowhere, Red Arc always keeps everything running smoothly. They've spent decades perfecting their products based on customer needs, putting in countless hours to design and test the toughest mobile power solutions out there. Born in the rugged terrain of Australia, Red Arc has been leading the way in mobile power solutions for 45 years. For more information about reliable off-grid power, go to headnowhere.com/redarc, which can also be found in the show notes. If there is one thing that people ask me more than anything else, it's how I store my clothes on the road. I have been using the same set of Eagle Creek packet cubes for the last 8.5 years. Since 1975, Eagle Creek has logged more miles and cleared customs more than anyone in the business. That hard-won insight is built into everything they make, from luggage to packing cubes and everything in between. In fact, I store my film in an Eagle Creek bag that was handed down to me from my grandmother, who used it in her travels over 20 years ago. And guess what? It's still going strong. Check them out at headnowhere.com/Eagle Creek. As longtime fans of Eagle Creek, we're proud to have them as a part of our everyday life, but also as a sponsor of Camp Nowhere. After we proceeded to spend the rest of the afternoon together, sitting outside of his home and observation building, taking in the whales, while also discussing life, politics, and Seinfeld. It's passionate people like Troy who dedicate their lives to help contribute to a better understanding of orcas as a whole, but also the unique pods that called these particular waters home. His love and admiration for these animals was absolutely infectious. Troy has a GoFundMe to help fund his work. We were able to find it on the internet, and it will be listed in the show notes for this episode. In one of our conversations after recording, he mentioned that a great deal of his equipment has been donated to him by people who have wandered across this beach much like we have. One of the pieces of equipment he said that he still is in desperate need of is a high-performing camera, so he has the ability to snap imagery of the orcas when they come in. Owen and I will be donating to his GoFundMe, obviously, because we'd love to help him on his way to getting a new camera. And you can do the same if you feel so moved. Troy, if you end up listening to this, thank you so much for your time, your inspiration, and your expertise on these orcas. You are an incredible ambassador to the orcas as well as to Malcolm Island. I hope our paths cross again very soon. Hey there, Mac here. I don't know why I said that. It's always Mac. Anyways, if you're enjoying Camp Nowhere, maybe you would want to consider checking out our Patreon. By joining, you'll get access to a ton of cool things, such as the ad-free version of this podcast, early screenings to our films, behind-the-scenes glimpses into life on the road, and a whole lot more exclusive content. Plus, your support helps us keep creating and improving as multifaceted storytellers. We legitimately could not do it without you, so a big thank you to everyone who has already joined us in our sunny little corner of the internet. If you're curious, take a spin around at headnowhere.com/Patreon. See you there.